Okay, it's 4 o'clock. What's going on? It's past 4 o'clock. What's going on? And today, it's our 101st show for Chris and I. Those of you who tuned in, our engineer, the man behind the scenes, is Christopher Pope. And wait a minute, I just put this together. But today, my guests are Gino, and I didn't get this, Gino. Before we did the show, I was going to ask you this question: is it Patti or Patti, or
Yep.
how would I say your
If you're
last
gonna
name?
do the Sicilian pronunciation, it's Patti, but everyone calls
Patti.
Patty. Uh,
Everybody says
interestingly, Gino's not even my real first name either. It's Gioacchino, which is also Sicilian, and so no one
wow,
can spell it.
Giacchino
And
Patti.
no one can spell it. No one can say it. So it's Gino Patty. Yeah.
So and Gino is an artist who's got an exhibition going on right now in the E Atrium here at the LaGuardia Fine Art Gallery under the direction of Dina Pizzarello, who's one of our faculty here at the college as well. And also to join us on the show is Dr. Sigmund Shen from the English department, who, for some of you who may know, Sigmund is a enthusiast, or actually has done research on Godzilla. Would you say your research is on the phenomena, or how'd you
Not the
categorize it?
phenomena, I guess the metaphors of the stories themselves. Yeah.
Metaphors, okay. From the academic, so it's going to be an interesting show where we combine the fine arts with academic research here.
I'm
And
really
just the
down for
love,
this. If you don't know,
the love, yeah, your love. And I don't even know, I can't even remember how this came together, because I had been sharing. What's interesting is I had been sharing with Sigmund that I had a student who did a self-portrait in a box, which is an assignment I give. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Cornell box, but it's basically like Cornell was a guy who lived in Queens. He lived in Eastern Queens, Utopia Park, I think, or something, some area. Anyhow, he used to do these things where he'd take the American Curio, which is where these little boxes where you collect things. Sometimes like put things in little squares, and he would create. They were so elaborate and beautiful that he kind of got co-opted by the surrealists. And so, if you look it up, the Cornell
Wow.
box. But my students, I have them is create a self-portrait in a box, and the student had all of this imagery about Godzilla, and
Wow.
particularly who is the scientist? Okay, the Japanese
Serizawa.
scientist. Yeah, man,
Portrait
he was like,
portraits
I
all.
think
Yeah.
he was completely like that was an almost an avatar
Oh,
figure
I'm
for
now I'm
him.
worried about your student. Oh boy.
no, no. Tragic
All
character.
right, dark.
Yeah.
It's a well, this is what's fascinating is that you're just going along, bloop de bloop, try to come up with an assignment, try to keep it interesting, because the course I was teaching it is we call it first year seminar, which is literally a course that teaches students how to go to college. But because it's a fine arts course, we use it as an opportunity to get them to see, like, to do a drawing, to do a painting, to do a sculpture, to do an integrative piece. So, most of our students come to us with an illustration back, copying comic books or album covers all their lives. And and they haven't had a lot of experience with 3D. So getting them to do this kind of Cornell box self-portrait is a kind of an easy way to transition into, or at least I think it is. But then, of course, then somebody shows up with the mad scientist avatar.
Wow.
It's a
That guy's
fascinating,
very comfortable with 3D. A little too comfortable.
anyhow, I talked a little bit about the format of the show, but let's see if we can get on point. Um, Sigmund, by the way, or should I say, Dr. Shen,
Sigmund.
has been on the show many times for various reasons. I think the last time you were on the show, we were talking about the anti-Asian violence that was going on in the city,
Yeah.
and you
It was just
that
that one
show.
time. The other times were all in my fantasy, but that was the one time I
Right?
actually
I
wasn't.
can't remember. I thought you might have been on for something with the union, as you're wearing the PSC cap
Yeah.
there. But Gino is certainly a first timer on our show, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell us about your background, your studies before your engagement. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, My name's Gino Patti. I am a illustrator, and I actually am an art instructor. So I teach at Passaic County Tech in Wayne, which is a large technical school, and we have a large communications art department, and I am the art teacher there, uh, one of many. And I teach basically all the visual arts, the traditional mediums, and as well digital, like Photoshop and 3D sculpting, ZBrush, ZBrush Mini Core. So pretty much the whole gamut of artistic expression and how to apply it to a portfolio and just like entry level professionalism in the field. And before I became a teacher, I've only been teaching for 15 years. I was I went to Pratt Institute for illustration, and I graduated from their ComD department, which is like illustration and design mixed together. And I thought I was going to be a comic book artist. So I interned at Valiant Comics, which at the time was the third largest comic book publisher in New York. So they did stuff like XO Manowar and Bloodshot, which they made a movie with Vin Diesel. Um, and so I worked for that comic book company, thinking I was going to break into comics, but I ended up seeing how hard it was to break in and how much like you needed to know. And I ended up becoming a production assistant and learning about the business and going, well, I think I just want to like design the characters and have someone else draw it because it's so time consuming. And I was already getting jobs in animation design. So I started getting into animation design where I worked on a TV show that's still on. It's called Cyber Chase. It's on Channel 13. It teaches kids math. And I was one of the
I know that show. I remember my daughter coming up on that show.
yeah, so
It
I was involved in the first episode, getting the pilot off the ground, and I was actually they gave me the title of a cleanup artist, but I actually was helping the main artist like with characters, ancillary characters, and cleaning up, and I did that for a little bit, and after that pilot was over, I went into uh, commercial character design. So I worked on some characters for Banana Boat and things like that, and a bunch of stuff that was like developed but never came out, like toys and stuff. Actually, some toys did come out. I did some puzzles, illustrations for puzzles, and this and that. So I had like a good little career going, but I wanted to have something that was more permanent. And so I found this job that hired me to do an animation on the computer using Flash. This was like a new thing, like doing animation using this program called Flash, where you would do these vector animations and you could actually do a cartoon right on your computer. You didn't need a whole studio. You could just the computer was your studio. So I started developing this cartoon that was going to be this educational program that taught you about history, and then the funding just went out, and the design company liked me so much, like, hey, don't go away, we want to keep you for stuff. So they just used me as an illustrator for like a very long time, and I did that for a really long time, and then eventually working at that company, they kept on giving me more and more work, and that was more design oriented. So I started getting into web design, and I did that for a few years, and then finally I was just doing like advertising. So I would use my Flash skills that I learned for animation, all of my web design skills that I learned, and all of this kind of like creating uh, almost like motion graphics to advertise, and I was getting paid for that. But I started to get like burnt out on it, and I was like doing ads for like Viagra and diet pills. And I was like, this is really soul crushing. This is not why I went to Pratt Institute. This is not why what I wanted to do. So I said, I'm going to make a comic book, and I'm going to. And while I was kind of like, I didn't quit, I was just doing it on the side. But while I was doing that, my uncle, who was a teacher at the time of computer science at Passaic County Tech, said, there's going to be an art job opening up. Check it out. And I was like, well, I never considered myself to be a teacher. I was like one of those kids that like uh, English as a second language. It was very, very tough for me to articulate myself, and I just didn't know if I could do it. But I always wanted to be a professor. I always thought college professors were the coolest, right? So I was like, oh, maybe I'll learn.
We're pretty cool, right? Right, Sigmund? We're
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I always aspired to do that. So I gave it a shot. I went and I'm like, and I said, like, I'll give it a year, and if I like it, I'll stick with it. And if I say 15 years later, I'm still doing it. So the great thing about teaching was it gave me a lot of free time, and I had summers off, and a lot of these convention shows are in the summer. So I started doing these conventions where I would sell comic book art, like Batman, Spider-Man, all of the well-known characters. But at these comic conventions, I was competing with like hundreds and hundreds of guys that were either as good as I was or better, like far better. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna make my money back because you have to, at every convention you have to like pay for a table up front, like you have to, and then you have to sell to make back your table and whatever you invested to get there, and hotels or whatever. And I was breaking even, and I was like, I'm never going to make enough money because I'm competing with too many people. So I ran into this guy. His name is John Bellotti Jr., and he is a guy who was really into Godzilla. It was the first person I ever bumped into my whole entire life being a Godzilla fan that I actually knew what I was talking about, that liked the same stuff. Because like I was walking around New York, going to like underground video stores to get these movies that weren't brought over from Japan. It came out in the 80s and 90s, and
Yeah.
I knew no one that was into this stuff. And so I was at a party, and this guy who was friends with my now wife started talking to me about Godzilla. He's like, "Yeah, we should sell our stuff," and he started doing it. And I'm like, "Well, if he's doing it, I'm going to do it too." And so he's like, "Well, there's this big convention called G Fest in Chicago. It's like the mecca of Godzilla fans." He's like, "You'd be, instead of trying to compete with all of these other guys, you're going to compete with a real small pool, and your artwork is going to stand out." So I was like, all right, I better start drawing some Godzillas then, because I only had a couple at that point that I had done just for like personal reasons, and I wanted to redesign the character. I was just messing around, but um, at that point when G Fest was like looming, I was just generating all of these artworks now that you see, and I did it a few times. Yeah, that
We
you will
will
see
see
at some point.
on the show
So I started
and at
generating all this
the
work.
EA
So.
stream. Yeah.
And it went over well, and I made a profit, and people responded to my work. I started to get a little bit of a following, and not only that, but these Godzilla fans that I know, like John Bellotti, Leonard Romero, there's so many of them that are great. You know, Nick Shev, Larry Quach, all these great guys, started to get to know them. And Bill Couture, I know I'm gonna forget somebody, but I'm just rattling off names. But all these guys like took me in, and they were like really, really cool, and they were fun and hilarious. And I really like enjoyed doing the show. So I did it again and just generated more work. And now I have a lot of Godzilla art. And and yeah, I was always a fan from a child. Uh, it was just one of those things that serendipitously happened, because something that I was a fan of that I really liked to draw, that was a challenge to draw, had this small fan base, like in comparison to Marvel or something, and I could exploit that in a business sense. So it really worked out really well. Um, so I haven't done shows for a while because of COVID, but I plan to go back at some point and get into it again.
And when we're going to talk about this in a minute, but the fact, because the way the show we're having here at the college, it's like it's in a high art context. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, we're showing this as high art, the way the gallery works. And but if you've ever toured the campus, you would see a lot of art on the walls, including the work of one of our faculty, one of our technicians, Helmut Epic, who's also, I don't know if you've ever heard of Demon Boy, but that's his comic book. So there is, and like I said, a lot of our students come to us that way. I want to get Sigmund in here a little bit. So Sigmund, is that what you would call the Godzilla? What is it? The Godzilla verse? this fan? Is it a niche culture, or how big is it? Would you and what are the what's the structure of it
I mean,
from
I
your
guess
own?
it started off more like, you know how like Star Wars used to be niche, used to be for like sci-fi nerds, right? And like now everyone knows it. You got like Disney Plus, and it's like it's more mainstream. You see like, people on the street talking about the Mandalorian and stuff, right? Godzilla was even smaller than that. Probably, I don't know, Gino. I'd love to talk with you about how you came to it when you were a kid, but like with me, it was just like 4:30 movie and like Thanksgiving
Exactly.
festivals. There was just it was
Yeah,
awesome. It was so much fun. We didn't really think about it,
Right.
but now I'm listening to Gino talk, and I'm like, he makes money. He gets paid to create art based on something that he loved when he was a kid. Just like I don't get paid to do it, but like I can do it. I can do research. I can do scholarship, and it counts as part of the work that I would have to do anyway. Except I don't have to do it on something boring like Shakespeare. I can do it on something I enjoy doing. But I think around the time that Gino, when you met your friend who got you to G
Hmm.
Fest, who I haven't met him, but around that time in the 80s and 90s, they were getting ready to try in the 90s. TriStar was getting ready to make an American movie, right? That was 1998, and even though the movie wasn't great, like a lot of people weren't crazy about the movie, still it had a huge impact. Like all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
all these bootlegs of VHS tapes were coming to Chinatown. Like all kinds of stores in New York City, and people were like, "Wait, they've been making Godzilla movies since like 1984," and like a lot of us were we were grown ups or we were out of college and we came back to where we were like, "Oh wow, there's new stuff," and it brought us back to our childhood.
Right.
I guess now,
There was a
yeah.
copy of Godzilla versus.
we're broadcasting again. So, Dr. Shen,
Yes.
how does this relate to your own research of with the Godzilla uh, audience? Is it a niche? Is it a niche market, and when did it start? Like getting
Right. Yeah. No, it's kind of like, you walk around now, you're on the street and like everyone's wearing a Star Wars t-shirt. Even these, a lot of us kids, we thought it was like this little thing that only we knew about. Godzilla was like that, right? So I'm watching Gino and I'm like, this guy gets paid to create art based on a passion that we had when we were kids that we just did it for fun. We watch movies on like Gino, if you remember like like the 4:30 movie and the Thanksgiving festivals of on what was it, on Channel 9 PIX,
Well,
which
yeah, in New York, they had them on 9 and WPIX
oh
too.
yeah,
They
that's
had
right.
like, I think they had like a kung fu monster like team up at one point, where you
Oh
had like a kung
wow.
fu movie and then a monster movie at the on the other end of it. So
I
yeah,
remember a
it was
lot
like
of that.
Saturdays. I was probably like 5 or 6 when that started up.
Oh hell yeah. Saturday afternoon Kung Fu Theater and like one year they had like remember Crazy Eddie? They had
Yeah,
like Crazy Eddie put on like a Godzilla mask and he was like running his commercial and like you knew what he was because you'd seen his commercial a million times, so he
it
just did
must
a
have
Godzilla voice.
gotten
You never actually, you
it
know.
must have gotten popular because if you have someone actually tailoring their ad to the niche.
But
Yeah.
you were talking about the fact that in previous conversations we've had about when there was a remake of an American version of Godzilla. Was this back when in the 80s, you said, or the 90s?
This was
98.
TriStar was working on an American version in '98, and at that time, all of us did not know it was going to suck, right? We thought it was going to be amazing, right? So there was this rejuvenation of interest in Godzilla, and even though, like, we look back, it's like not the greatest movie, but that movie should get credit for basically making Godzilla mainstream. I mean, the legendary deal that they have now, it wouldn't have happened with all that because they found out they were American fans, and a lot of us, like Gino and me, we were suddenly seeing bootlegs of like all these Japanese movies that we'd never seen, but were part of the series that we loved when we were kids, and we suddenly came back to it. It's just like your story, Gino, like in the '80s and '90s, like finding all these bootlegs.
Yeah, you
Outside,
had to.
yeah,
There was a couple of videos up at Blockbuster, but like for the most part, they didn't start pouring them in till a little bit later. But like when they were coming out, like I remember I saw a commercial. I would watch I would watch like the Asian channel that you could get like on like uh over the broadcast
yeah,
antennas
yeah, yeah,
because it
yeah.
would change like Vision or something. just to see the new Godzilla commercial.
Oh,
And then I would
nice.
see it and I go, oh, I gotta go run out and get that video and go to Chinatown and find it. So that was like my whole like teenage, early 20s life. That, I mean, that's how much of a nerd I was at that point. Um,
And I want to get this in before we do the station break at 4:30. Is how did you find yourself in the LaGuardia Fine Arts Gallery? How did Dina Pizzarello and LaGuardia come into your
well, I
world?
think Dina is a very good friends with my wife, and I think they both teach at the same school. And she's seen my artwork before, and she asked me to send over some artwork, and so I sent her a bunch of stuff, and she really like thought that the Godzilla stuff would make a great show. So there's plenty of it. And so she said, "Are you interested in having your work up?" I'm like, "People want to put my work up? Like, yeah, go ahead, do it, please."
Awesome.
you know. uh,
All
So
right.
I was very excited to have it displayed.
So is this the first time? Again, I was talking before that I don't know if it got on the recording or not. That this is in a high art context because you're typically used to selling your work to fans. I don't know what you'd call that, a commercial context. Here, I mean, the fine art is obviously commercial, but here at the college, it's not. We're not selling
Right.
it. So is this was the first time you've done like an art show kind of gallery thing like this?
I've had student exhibitions at Pratt and things like that, but and nothing like this. No, where I have a show up. I've had my work in shows, but not like a whole thing dedicated or a whole theme.
Yeah, and the work that's on display in the atrium, how is it produced? Are these like things that you've hand drawn? Are they digital printouts of designs if you've created over time?
Well, almost everything that I do starts out with a pencil and a piece of paper, and then it might graduate to the computer at some point, but usually it's a drawing on a piece of paper. I put ink on it, and then I clean up that ink. I scan it into the computer, and then I use that ink as like the basis of what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll do a painting in the computer where there's just like I'll just start the whole thing in the computer and just start painting it like a painting. And then there's actual acrylic paintings. So there's all three kinds of different ways that are being displayed in the show. So there's straight up acrylic painting with a paintbrush on a canvas. Those are very few of those, maybe like 4 or 5. And then there's a few of them that I just painted in the computer using Adobe Photoshop and using brushes and things like that. And then the other ones are that method, which is I draw it on a piece of paper, I ink it, and then color it in the computer and add effects and stuff.
All right. And I know Sigmund, you've seen some of the work, but you've seen it through the website. You didn't see it up in the atrium yet?
I haven't been back since December, so I think it started probably after the semester ended.
Yeah.
No, but
I'm
the
trying to
website
remember
was
because I know there
amazing.
was a different
Yeah.
show. Okay, so we're gonna actually in the second half of the show we're gonna actually take a look at the Behance or the Behance. We haven't figured out how to pronounce it. The Behance website where Gino has a lot of his work, and we're gonna go through some of these images and talk about them. And Sigmund, you should feel free to. You're gonna be. It's like in this case, like as if we were doing a baseball game, Gino will be play by play, and you will be color. Well, you're gonna fill in and give some background stuff on this. But it's 4:29, whether on the recording or not in the real world. The show you're watching is What's Going On. I'm your host Hugo Fernandez here on LaGuardia Web Radio, and my guest today is Gino Patti, who is an artist and has an exhibition going on right now at the LaGuardia Fine Arts Gallery with the focus on Godzilla. And I brought on Dr. Sigmund Shen of the English department, who has done a lot of his scholarship on the Godzilla phenomenon, metaphor, the poetry of Godzilla in our culture. And we want to move into now this in the second half of the show. What's gonna happen is my engineer Chris Pope is going to try to stream the link, which by the way I think we shared in the announcement, the link to Gino's website but Chris is going to be showing some of the images that are actually in the show. So are you able to do that, Chris? Are you going to be doing that now? I'm waiting to see if it's when it gets up on. I guess we're going to see it here on Skype as well. So Gino and Sigmund are going to be able to. Oh, that's it. I don't know if we figured that out yet. Okay, so I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it on the Twitch, and as one of the boxes. I don't know if he's going to make that the largest. I don't know if Sigmund, since you're not watching Twitch, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this as well. Oh, there we go. There you go, Chris.
Okay, yeah.
Beautiful.
Nice.
So why don't you scroll us through a little bit to pick up
That
some of the first Godzilla images. Oh, you want? Oh, can you click on it? Makes it bigger. All right.
Um,
Hold on, Chris
there
is
we go.
having some.
So there's
there we go.
there's
He's
others
trying to get
box
rid
there.
of.
Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. But basically,
Well, we see it, but the audience doesn't. They only see it as one of many.
yeah. So this was like
things.
the first time I did. I didn't have any reference. I didn't have anything to go off of. I just was like remembering Godzilla. So this is like a memory more than anything else. No,
So
I hadn't
you weren't
even
looking at
hadn't
anything when
even
you
watched a movie
created
in
it.
a while. It was just like my impression of what Godzilla was at that moment in 1995 or something.
And Sigmund had to hit me up to the fact that I called in one of the when we were putting together the teaser. I called him a mutated lizard, and what Sigmund has said to me is that no, he is that God, according to whatever the fandom that or the wiki fandom, whatever it is, it's a dinosaur.
Well, in
right?
in the remake of Godzilla versus King Ghidorah that they did in the 80s or in the late 90s, I believe.
1991.
They retconned the story, so yeah, right. They retconned the story, so he was a dinosaur, and you actually saw the Godzillasaurus before it was mutated.
Yeah.
So like it's canon.
And here and he's pretty ripped here. He's got some good pecs
Yeah,
there.
I was a comic book artist, so everything I do has anatomical references to it. Like even though I can't undo it, sometimes I try and like get that out. But
Yeah.
I think that's what makes my artwork different than most other Godzilla artists. Is that
Oh yeah.
I do know anatomy very well, and I do include it. And some people tend to like it. They're like, "Oh, I like your take on Godzilla. That it's not just like a lizard-like or dinosaur-like. It's kind of like a WWF wrestler or a WWE wrestler now.
Right.
Or a superhero.
Yeah, or a superhero.
But in the fire, by the way, looks like there's some sort of shadow figure. Is that the case, or I'm just seeing that?
I left it. I left it very vague, so you could think that. So it's like I wanted to like not be anything specific in that area. I just wanted to like he's turning his head, like something's behind him. I think
Subliminal.
yeah, it's just kind of give an indication, like to tell us a narrative through that. We could take a look at. Anybody have any questions about this one, or we could take a look at another one.
Well, let's look at another one, Chris. Let's take us out and.
You could scroll down to hit the blue one on the bottom right there.
Blue, right? Yeah. My wife would say that's turquoise.
It's bluish. So this is I did a series of t-shirt designs with a cartoony version, like kind of like a child, not a childlike, but like a kind of like baby version of
yeah, right, a reducted.
Yeah, and these were very popular. People responded to these a lot because people want things that look heroic, but they also want cute things as well. So this cute Godzilla thing really started like a whole series. So I've basically the way Godzilla works is there was the original that came out in 1954, and then they kept on making more. And each time that they would make a new couple of movies, they would change the suit. And I have certain suits that I gravitate to that I like the best. So I decided I'd just do the ones that I really like off first, and then I'd do the other ones like Son of Godzilla. Like I'll do that one last. I'm like, that's not my favorite version.
Yeah,
But so
I got a
go
question.
ahead.
Question. The question I had, and you're bringing Sigmund in here. Does anybody control the rights to Godzilla as an image or as a concept,
Yeah,
or
We've
no?
talked about that before.
I mean, do we have to
Toho.
answer to that as artists?
I think. Well, Sigmund, you can answer this. Go ahead. You probably know more than
No,
I
we were
do.
before the show started. We're talking about how Toho, the company that owns Godzilla, they are notoriously lawyer happy. So that's I guess that's occupational hazard for folks who do this kind of art.
Well,
Reggie.
if you ever been to a comic book convention, there's tons of artists selling art based on Spider-Man, and Marvel doesn't go after them
Right.
because they're dropping the bucket. They're really not taking money out of Marvel's pockets. Like they see it as free advertisement. They're like they have a fandom,
Right.
Which it
they-
is. I
they're
mean,
getting everybody excited, they're bringing people in to into the commerce world. So they don't have a
Right.
problem with it. They don't see it as a big issue. They might start cracking down on it now because the internet has made it easier to make money, and
Right.
it's harder to track some guy that's at a booth, in different cities all over the place, but you could find someone's website where they're selling it. So I think they will crack down, and I think that now that Toho knows that they got a moneymaker and a franchise that's actually working, because the last film that they made actually exceeded their expectations. So it's a legitimate franchise now, and they're going to start going after people. Maybe not like me, because I feel like it'd be a waste of their time to like go out. They'd send me a letter, then I'd stop. That's how it would play out. They'd send me a cease and desist, and they'd be like, all right, I guess I'm not making any more of this stuff, and I'll pull it all down. But that's a gamble I'm taking. But I'm not really like making a living off of it. I'm a teacher, and I make a little extra money, and I have it fund my experiences that I have. So like going to the convention,
It's an avocation
yeah, it's kind of like,
as opposed to a vocation.
yeah. So they could go after me, and I'd happily stop if they want me to stop. But
Let's take a look at another one.
hey, go ahead, go take a look.
Chris.
Let's go with that one right above the woman. And this is from King of All Monsters, which was the one that they released in 2019, where they had 4 Toho characters. I kind of designed the poster around that, and this one was very popular. People responded a lot to this one. Eventually,
Yeah,
I'd like to make a big print of it myself.
yeah, you're bringing in what is this like? What's the one with I call the 3-headed one Hydra, but is that wrong?
That's what the inspiration was.
But that's not the
No.
name of the monster, right? I got to tell you, as a kid, that was my
Yeah.
favorite one.
Ghidra.
because he was
That was
interesting
my
to
favorite.
watch.
Like, well, it came in, and I don't, it's kind of bizarre because what happens is on these, I look, I grew up in South Florida, and on Saturday afternoons they had science fiction theater or whatever it had. I mean, they'd mix it up once in a while it'd be Abbott and Costello. Sometimes it'd be like the Universal Monster stuff, but certainly there was a science theater, and you'd watch these things go at it with each other. So I remember the original Hydra, and then when Hydra gets into it with Godzilla, they were enemies, then they're fighting together against things. Like I remember a worm somewhere.
That's Mothra, yeah.
There was that's Mothra, but before it turns into the moth,
Yeah,
or
there's the larva form.
This thing on the left here. But I got to tell you that the Hydra, maybe it's because I was a Hercules fan as a kid. I was into mythology. So when they brought the Hydra in,
in the movies he's called King Ghidra or Ghidorah, depending on how you want to pronounce.
Ghidra, that's what it was.
And then the little red guy there, that's Rodan.
Oh, Rodan! I was into Rodan.
Which is like a fire phoenix type of a dinosaur or pterodon or something like that. I don't even know.
It's funny how I forgot about all this stuff.
But it was a cool movie, and it was a great opportunity to take these new designs and incorporate them into my artwork. And I really like the way this one came out. I like the dramatic lighting and how they all kind of converge in the composition. So
now you said that you teach 3D printing. Have you thought about going 3D? And I know both of you have. You've got you've got a whole shelf of stuff behind you, Gino, and I
Yeah,
know that Sigmund has his now over his left shoulder
Looks so
or
far
on the
away.
right of our screen there. So I know that
I
you guys have.
I have done it. So I could show you one or two. One is right in my over my shoulder back here. Hold on, just let me grab it. Now this is a little complicated. This is actually my design, reinterpreted by a very famous 3D artist named Dopope, and I painted it. So this is my kaiju. His name is Xenogantus. I designed him, and Dopope just made it look really awesome. And it's 3D.
Yes, Sigmund
I
can't
can
see
see it.
because I can see it on the Twitch, but I don't know what.
I can
Oh,
see it,
there we
yeah.
go.
Looks
Sigmund's seeing
amazing.
it.
Are those crystals or
It
feathers
looks
or?
almost like a
Yeah, it's
phoenix.
basically like a dragon, but it's like a alien dragon. So he's got these long arms and spikes on the end he could take out people with, and then he's kind of like in a crouched position, but
Oh,
he could like stretch up and with his tail push himself up to be really tall. And then these things would are wrapped around his arm. They open up into big wings, so he could fly. And he has a jewel here that he could fire a beam out of, and a beam jewel on top right there that he could fire a beam out of. And I
no,
actually
are you
have a
talking about
drawing of it
putting a?
on the Behance, but this was a 3D print that was done by Dope Hope. I printed it and colored it, but he designed it. He sculpted it.
Oh
Yeah,
my
That's
gosh!
amazing.
So you got the file and then you print it out. You going to say something,
No, I was just
Sigmund?
wondering if Gino, because are you thinking about making a comic book out of it?
yeah. I have so many comic books that are written and just waiting to be drawn. That I, I have a whole story with that one. Um, that's I want to actually put into a book or put. I was thinking of actually doing like stuff on YouTube where I could illustrate almost like a children's book, like tell the story in like almost like a storyboard that's
Oh yeah,
fully
yeah.
illustrated, and I could narrate it and kind of write out the narration and they could watch it. That's something I've been wanting to do for a really long time, but hopefully I'll get to do it soon.
Xenogantus, that's his name.
Xenogantus, you can see it on the Behance. There's a couple of sketches on there.
I didn't see it. Oh,
So Sigmund, you talked about the fact that the Godzilla. In your studies, you look into the metaphors. What what would be the metaphor of a creature like that was created?
well,
I mean, why do we become? Why are we so excited about these
well,
things?
that's two separate questions. I mean, every time they
Is
come
it
out with a new movie, especially an American movie, you'll see all these articles on the web, clickbait articles saying, "Did you know that Godzilla is about the nuclear bomb?" Like people had never heard of this before. Like, the first movie was about Hiroshima.
exactly?
Like obviously people knew about it, but in my research, I looked back at also at World War II. And at Sarazawa, I don't remember if it was before the show started or after the show started when you were talking about your student who was using Sarazawa as an avatar. And there are scenes between Sarazawa
Yeah.
and when you see him in his laboratory, and another scene when he gets interrogated about his connection to a German scientist that are they're metaphors of the nuclear bomb, but they're also allusions to the science programs, the research programs were conducted by Germany and Japan during World War II, and how it was inhumane experimentation. It was experimentation on human subjects, prisoners. But after the war was done, a lot of the ringleaders of that program were they were promoted in society, and then the U.S. government got the data and exchanged pardoned people, so that a lot of that couldn't really be talked about officially, but it could be talked about through movies, through art. I think
Operation
after
Paperclip, they called it when
Oh,
they moved.
really?
yes,
Operation
when paperclip
Paperclip
when they
is
got
where
the
they
data, that's right.
yeah, they moved
Yeah.
all the former Nazi scientists. We
Mhm.
got some. The Russians got some. I didn't realize that there were also Japanese
It
scientists
was it was
that were
if you
got.
Google Unit 731, but paperclip's going to be in the new Indiana Jones movie because
Oh,
they're going
really?
back to a lot of that secret
Wow.
history. But the next one's coming out next year. Yeah. But so after Hiroshima, right? You couldn't talk directly about the nuclear attack in Japan. Like
Right.
movies were censored because we occupied Japan. Why we want people to talk about it, right? So after that was lifted, people could do it, but then there wasn't really a lot of interest in talking about it, right? And there was less interest in talking about Unit 731 and what was going on in Germany because it was too. It was painful to talk about, and it was also hurtful to the careers of people potentially, you know. So through Sarazawa, they were able to make allusions to stuff that was kind of an open secret, you know. People knew about it, but they weren't supposed to talk about it.
He was also very hip. He's a really good dresser, and and I liked really what I love the part too is that when he goes into the water to kill Godzilla at the end, he's got the eye patch still on underneath the mask.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good. We've moved into the last quarter hour, so we should talk about the future. But we kind of have already because it looks like you're already kind of setting yourself up, Gino, to
Yeah.
if in case the kibosh comes down on they put the kibosh on you on the Godzilla stuff that you would move into some other characters.
Yeah. Well, even at G Fest and all these other shows, the writing's on the wall that Toho's kind of like being litigious, and there's even been like uh, contracts that you have to sign where you're like, you can't use Godzilla's image if you're going to participate in the show. And there's things like that out there already. So um, I want to at some point start creating things, whether it be on YouTube. I don't know if comic books are a thing anymore. I know people still read them, but I feel like it's more important for me to get my ideas out there and connect them to make money. I want things to be. I want my creations to be in people's hearts and minds, and not really worry about the money. I already have a career to make something and to express myself through my art. So if I could share it with people, um, like on YouTube for free, I will. If I could find a way to get the stuff made and put it out and for people to enjoy, I'm going to.
So you're talking about animation at this point.
Animated, but basically like a storybook. 'All these guys that I know in the Godzilla community we're planning on working on something together in the future. I know that's we've batted it around. Maybe it'll come to fruition soon, but 99% of it is stuff I do in class in front of my kids so they could see it being done. And I like to demo my work. I like to work live right in front of them. Even if I make mistakes, even if it's not perfect, I show them, okay, look, you can sit here for an hour and a half and watch something happen. And maybe it's not 100% done, but they'll have an idea of like, oh, I could do that, or oh, that's how he does it. And I kind of take the mystique away of how I generate art. So I'm always generating it because I'm demoing all the time. So a lot of the stuff that's up on my Instagram, some of the stuff that's on Behance, they're all just demos I didn't. I wasn't like setting out to make a big artistic statement. It was just kind of like, this is what I feel like doing in this, and um, just trying to connect to that momentary thing. It's almost like being a stand-up comedian in a way, where you're just in the moment and you're like working with the crowd or something, and you're spitballing. It's kind of like that's what happens in class a lot. Like I'll be like, "What do you want me to do?" And they'll be like, "I do Batman," and then I'll just up there and I'll start, and it'll be like this thing. And they'll be involved, and well, this is how I do this, and I'll show them that. So it's kind of like a performance, and then that's the result of the performance. A lot of the time.
Okay, Sigmund, where are you with your scholarship on the Godzilla?
Just had a chapter come out about Gino's favorite movie, Son of Godzilla, in a collection called Giant Bug Cinema. The proceeds of that you can find on Amazon. The proceeds of that are going to animal rights organizations. And talking with a professor who's working with Osaka University Press, she had published my and a friend of mine's articles in her last collection of Godzilla essays, and she's trying to work out a deal for a sequel. So hopefully, I'll let the college know about that. I'm really excited to follow Gino's work and check out his Instagram, and I can't wait to see that.
Thank you.
All right, so my experience of the original Godzilla, and it was probably, I was living in New York at the time because I lived in New York City. I was living in Inwood as a kid up until the second grade, and I remember seeing Frankenstein alone. So I might have seen Godzilla too, but it was, to me, it was a well-made picture. For example, the way that they created the tension by not seeing the monster.
Yeah.
You just kept seeing the effects of the monster, or the sounds, in fact, you heard long before you ever saw the actual. Maybe they were afraid of, much like the way Spielberg, when he made Jaws, like you're halfway through the picture, you haven't even seen the thing yet, and but it creates that tension, and the scientists. I mean, everybody was pretty cool. The scientist was very frightening. I remember that scene where he's got the fish tank and he shows how he's going to like dissolve it. That was
that was like a horror movie.
Yeah.
That was in fact it goes right to like Bride of Frankenstein or something like that. That kind of caliber of Universal horror films. Anyhow, but we're running out of time, so we should probably finish up. I want to give you both an opportunity to any last things you want to share or folks you want to thank.
Sure. I would love to thank Dina Pizzarello for putting my artwork up, and I hope that people enjoy it. And if they want, you could follow me on Instagram at Gino Draws on Instagram. And I also want to thank my wife for making the connection between Dina and myself. And I'd also like to thank John Bellotti Jr., who was the guy I talked to, who kind of brought me into this world where I didn't even know it existed. I was at these. Yeah, I'm just happy to be involved with all these great artists in that community, and it's a great community. You should check it out. And that's basically it.
Sigmund, anybody you want to?
Right. I want to thank
shout out or thank
Hugo and his team. You guys are amazing. It's always fun. It's always a pleasure and honor to be here. And I'm just so happy to meet Gino. Like, to see your paintings. That first painting that you showed, like the way you talked about how you painted it from memory. You weren't doing it from a movie. And this was a memory of when you were a kid. So that painting, like, it's like a time capsule of like a kid's view, of the monster, like kind of untouched by Hollywood, And I want to go back and look at all your work again.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Thank you for good meeting you, Sigmund. Wish you could talk more.
You can. But, you could talk. You guys maybe get together and go to G Fest together.
Hey.
And we do, and we want to. Yeah, we want to do a special thanks to Dina Pizzarello and the LaGuardia Fine Arts Gallery. We do these shows as regularly as we can as the shows turn over and as we can find folks who have time to talk to us about it. So big thanks to Dina, and thanks to everybody for watching, for listening. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and today my guests have been artist Gino Patti, who's having an exhibition right now in the Atrium in the LaGuardia Fine Arts Gallery, and Dr. Sigmund Shen of the English department. And, we've been talking about the world's favorite mutated dinosaur, Godzilla. So we're going to go out the way we came in. Mr. Pope, please take us out. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.